As you know, if I was standing at the beginning of time with the possibility of a general and panoramic view of the whole of human history up until now, the Almighty said to me, Martin Luther King, which age would you like to live in? I would take my mental flight on by Egypt. And I would watch God's people in that magnificent trip through the deep dark dungeons of Egypt, through, or rather across the Red Sea, through the wilderness, on towards the promised land. But in spite of its magnificence, I wouldn't stop there. I would go on by Greece and take my mind to Mount Olympus. And I would see Plato, Socrates, Aristotle, Euripides, and Aristophanes assembled around the Parthenon, discussing the great and eternal issues of reality, but I wouldn't stop there. I would go on even into the great heyday of the Roman Empire. And I would see developments around there through various emperors and leaders, but I wouldn't stop there. I would even come up to the great day of the Renaissance. Get a quick picture of all that the Renaissance did for the culture and aesthetic life of man, but I wouldn't stop there. I would even go by the way of the man for whom our name had its habitat. And I would watch Martin Luther tack his 95 Theses on the door of the church in Wittenberg, but I wouldn't stop there. I would even come up to 1863. Watch a vacillating president by the name of Abraham Lincoln finally coming to the conclusion that he had to sign the Emancipation Proclamation, but I wouldn't stop there. I would even come up to the early 30s. See a man grappling with the problems of the bankruptcy of his nation, coming up with the eloquent cry that we have nothing to fear but fear itself, but I wouldn't stop there. Strangely enough, I would turn to the Almighty. And I would say, if you would just allow me to live just a few more years in the second half of the 20th century, I will be happy. Now that's a strange statement to make. That's a strange statement to make. The world is all messed up. The nation is sick. Trouble is in the land. Confusion all around. That's a strange statement to make. But I know somehow that only when it is dark enough can you see the stars. And I see God working in this period of the 20th century in a way where men in some strange way are responding. Something is happening in our world. The masses of people are rising up, and wherever they are assembled today, whether it be Johannesburg, South Africa, Nairobi, Kenya, Accra, Ghana, New York City, Jackson, Mississippi, or Memphis, Tennessee, the cry is always the same: we want to be free. Another reason that I'm happy that God has allowed me to live in this period is because we have been forced to a point where we're going to have to grapple the problems that men have been trying to grapple with throughout history. But the demands didn't force them to grapple with them. Survival forces us to grapple with it. Men for years have been talking about war and peace. But now no longer can we just talk about it. It is no longer the choice between violence and non-violence in this world. It is non-violence or non-existence. That is where we are today. Let us rise up tonight with a greater readiness. Let us stand with a greater determination. Let us move on in these powerful days, these days of challenge to make America what it ought to be. We have an opportunity to make America a better nation. And I'm just happy that God has allowed me to live in this period. I'm happy that God has allowed me to be in Memphis. You know, several years ago I was in New York City, autographing the first book that I had written. While sitting there autographing books, a black woman came up. The only question that I heard from her was, "Are you Martin Luther King?" And I was sitting down right, and I said yes. Next minute I felt something beating on my chest. Before I knew it, I had been stabbed by this demented woman. I was rushed to Harlem Hospital. It was a dark Saturday afternoon. That blade had gone through, and the x-rays revealed that the tip of the blade was on the edge of my aorta, of the main artery. And once that punctured, you drown in your own blood. That's the end of it. Came out in the New York Times the next morning that if I had nearly sneezed, I would have died. They allowed me about 4 days later, after the operation, after my chest had been opened up and the blade had been taken out, to move around the wheelchair of the hospital. They allowed me to read some of the mail that came in. And from all over the state, country, and the world, kind letters came in. I read a few of them. One of them I will never forget. I received a telegram and a letter from the President and Vice President of the United States. But I've forgotten what those letters say. I received a letter, visit from the Governor of New York. And I've forgotten what that letter said. There was another letter. Came from a little girl. White girl. Now look at that letter and I'll never forget. It says, "Sympathy of Dr. King, I am a 9th grade student at the White Plains High School. While it should not matter, I'd like to mention I'm a white girl. And I read in the paper of your misfortune and of your suffering. And I read that if you would have nearly sneezed, you would have died. So I'm simply writing to say to you that I'm so happy that you didn't sneeze. And I want to say tonight that I too am happy that I didn't sneeze, because if I had sneezed, would have been around here in 1960. Students all over the South started sitting in the lunch counters. And I knew as they were sitting in, they were really standing up for the blessed American dream that took us back to those great wells of democracy, dug deep by the founding fathers of the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. If I had sneezed, would have been around here in 1961. We decided to take a ride for freedom and end the segregation on interstate travel. If I had sneezed, would have been around here in 1962. Black people in Albany, Georgia, decided to straighten their backs up. And whenever men and women decide to straighten their backs up, they're going somewhere, because a man can't ride your back unless it is bent. If I had sneezed, would have been around here in 1963. Black people, Birmingham, Alabama, roused the consciousness of this nation, brought into being the Civil Rights Bill. If I had sneezed, would have been around here later that year in August to try to tell America about a dream that I had. If I had sneezed, would have been in Selma, Alabama, to see the great movement there. If I had sneezed, wouldn't have been here in Memphis. See a community rally. If around those brothers and sisters who are suffering. I'm just so happy that I didn't sneeze. They were telling me, really doesn't matter what happens now. Really doesn't matter what happens now. Left Atlanta this morning, and as we got started on the plane, there were 6 of us. Pilot said with the public address system, we're sorry for the delay, but we have Dr. Martin Luther King on the plane. And to be sure that all the bags were checked, to be sure that nothing would go wrong on the plane, we had to check out everything carefully. We had the plane protected and guarded all night. Then I got to Memphis. Some began to say the threats, talk about the threats that were out. What was going to happen to me from some of our sick white brothers. Well, I don't know what will happen now. We've got some difficult days ahead. But it really doesn't matter with me now, because I've been to the mountaintop. And I don't mind. Like anybody, I would like to live long life. Longevity has its place. But I'm not concerned about that now. I just want to do God's will. He's allowed me to go up into the mountain, and I've looked over. Now I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land. So I'm happy tonight. I'm not worried about anything. I'm not fearing any man. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord.